One of the biggest patches yet is coming to Helldivers 2. There will be 24 different weapons and stratagems being tweaked. This alone is the most amount of balance changes we've seen in a single patch, and this is not counting the countless other bug fixes we could see that's unrelated to weapons or stratagems. We have a spear fix pretty much confirmed, most likely dropping in that new patch. Possible marksman rifle buffs to look forward to, maybe even damage over time gets fixed if we're lucky. And best of all, we're hopefully seeing fixes come to the brand new Airburst Launcher, and that's because many players have had some very strong thoughts on the new support weapon, myself included. I wanted to give my thoughts on the Airburst Launcher this video, even though it's possible it gets fixed within just a couple days, because unfortunately I'm not seeing a good pattern with some of the items, weapons, armor, whatever it's been, that have been added to the game lately. And I honestly want nothing more than for Helldivers to succeed, so we gotta go over some constructive criticism in this video. Now, if you've been living under a rock in the Helldivers community, then you haven't seen the countless clips, complaints, Reddit threads, and people just overall talking about their dissatisfaction with the Airburst Launcher that just got added into the game. I played with it for about 6.5 hours straight live on YouTube yesterday, by the way, so be sure to subscribe and get notified for when I go live. But I noticed some things about this weapon that seemed very off, and we're going to be deep diving on why this weapon is exploding in your face. Now, the first thing I could immediately tell when playing with it was that this is a team-killing monster, so I started using it from long range. But I then noticed that this gun is randomly exploding sometimes, and I think that this gun is extremely bugged and not working as intended at all. More on that testing in a second, because I do have some clips and comments on that. But what one of the community managers did say was that it is working as intended. And let's talk about this a little bit, because the Airburst Launcher is meant to work as a proximity explosive, that when it detects any object, that's when the explosive is detonated. That's how proximity explosives apparently work in real life as well, and the devs over at Arrowhead are mostly gun nerds and even ex-military, so a lot of the guns in the game are based off of real-life weapons, and it was intended to be a skill weapon that you must get yourself to a good line of sight, good position, and even start engagements from a longer range before going in and taking out those larger enemies. And from what I could tell, this was intended to be an absolute monster of a mobbing support weapon if you can do those things I mentioned earlier. But what's also cool about this weapon is it can actually be used against some of the heavier enemies. I think I found a way to consistently kill Hulks with it, at least when I'm not blowing myself up, and this gun pretty easily kills chargers, so it does deal with some of those enemies. So with that being said, and that out of the way, I wanted to do some more testing with it, because there are absolutely times when you fire this weapon that it seems like a completely clear line of sight, but it is for some reason just exploding in your face. Now here's a clip where it blows up over a supply pack, and before you ask, yes, I shot the gun multiple times in this exact area before we put the supply pack there. You might have even noticed in the clip, we completely cleared all the boxes, all the buildings in that area, and we pretty much made sure nothing else was in the way. Here's another clip of it detonating over one of the smoke mushrooms, and I immediately shot it afterwards in the same exact spot, through the smoke, and then once the smoke dissipated, and both times after the mushroom is gone, it doesn't detonate anymore. It also seems to possibly trigger at objectives. It definitely triggers if mines are on the floor below it, and it seems to just detonate if there's any interactables nearby in general. I've also had times where it seems like the proximity when I'm targeting enemies triggers very early on the first enemy in a group, and those explosions come directly back at me straight to my face. On top of that, I've had multiple times where I shot this in a group of enemies, and a lot of times, a lot of the enemies just seem to live, particularly Devastators, and the fact that this launcher only has 6 shots, as well as a 6-second reload that you can't multi-step reload, you have to sit there completely still and wait the full 6 seconds. Even when they do fix this proximity bug, I can't see a reason to bring this over something like the grenade launcher. The grenade launcher, for example, is a weapon that excels at mobbing against both factions. It's not meant to kill chargers or hulks, but if you can target the heat sinks, just like the Airburst Launcher, it'll take out tanks and cannon turrets in about 3 grenades, which you can easily rapid fire just as fast as you're able to fire the Airburst Launcher once. On top of that, it doesn't require a backpack, Most people love pairing the grenade launcher with the supply pack, so you even get stims and other grenades out of it, like stun grenades. And on top of that, you won't have to sit still for 6 seconds while reloading the grenade launcher. And I just can't help but feel like if the Airburst launcher wants to compete with a weapon like the grenade launcher, then the Airburst launcher needs to kill the group of mobs that you shoot this at consistently, especially if I'm forced to wear its backpack, especially with the low ammo count, and especially if I have to sit completely still for the whole 6-second reload. Now, a Reddit user by the name of I Am Thick posted these beautifully drawn ideas in MS Paint for how to fix this weapon. By the way, love your name. Now, the most important of what he mentioned is a minimum arm time, which was honestly the main idea I thought of when playing with this weapon. I think it should be set at around 30 meters, which, by the way, the Airburst launcher seems to be able to kill you even at up to 50 meters. So asking for a 30-meter minimum arm time would still make it so it could damage you. It just wouldn't detonate when trying to fire it from behind cover or if there's a random interactable nearby. Now it would have that minimum arm time, but we got to keep in mind you would want it to automatically detonate on impact. And he had a couple other great ideas. The other one I really liked was forward momentum shrapnel, and I'll put the rest of his ideas on the screen. Now, I want to talk about the mistake and pattern I have noticed with the way some of these weapons are launching, and we could do this by talking about why people dislike live service games as a whole. The number one reason that people dislike live service is that they tend to be cash grabs, which, again, Arrowhead, you've done a great job. Helldivers microtransactions are actually microtransactions, and they are not macrotransactions. So this isn't necessarily the problem. But the number two reason people dislike live service games is they tend to be extremely buggy, and the player base feels like the beta testers, while the devs focus on earning money from them. And again, out of these two problems, I think the money aspect is probably the more important factor here, and the reason why so many people love Helldivers, and Helldivers is just a very fun game in general. And they're definitely not making the big mistakes when it comes to live service. However, my issue is just more so with the amount of bugs being added with what feels like so many new weapons and patches at this point. For example, the Democratic Detonation Warbond introduced 3 new explosive weapons: the Eruptor, the Grenade Pistol, and the Crossbow, all of which, when the explosions deal self-damage, pulls you forward rather than pushing you away. And this becomes extremely awkward when they pull you directly into the group of enemies getting so close to you that you're willing to shoot an explosive weapon at close range and risk damaging yourself just to deal with them. And on top of that, many patches feel like they add just as many bugs to the game as they do fix them. You know, for a solid week there, arc weapons were crashing the game when they simply added their stats to the ending stat screen. The mech suit Rocket was bugged when it came out, that when you simply turned to the right while shooting a rocket, it collided with the body of the mech, completely destroying it. And instead of giving that rocket a few frames of minimum arming distance, again, by the way, they made it so that it's completely inaccurate at close and medium ranges so that it doesn't collide with the mech body, which they are now, for some reason, saying is intended, even though many players don't pick the mech suit anymore for this exact reason, because it's so inaccurate. And then they went on to also nerf the mech by also making it so that indirect hits won't penetrate heavy armor, even though it's very difficult to aim right now. Also, all the new level 4 ship modules are bugged in one way or another, not just the superior packing module, which I heard was getting possibly fixed in the next patch as well. And again, as to not sound super negative, I want to give Arrowhead props because the game just came out recently. In a lot of their patches so far, they've mainly been focusing all of these early patches to solving crash issues, which we gotta admit, those are the most important issues to fix early on in a game's life cycle. That's the highest priority, because if a game is crashing, then people simply can't play the game. And by no means am I trying to sound overly negative or throw shade at the developers criticizing them this way. I'm honestly just trying to add some constructive criticism here, which is overall positive and can lead to the game being more successful if the devs don't take this message personally. And the thing is, many of us want the game to succeed because we do find the gameplay loop very enjoyable, and they don't seem like a greedy company, which so many other franchises have been plagued with. The game has honestly been a breath of fresh air to the live service model. Many other companies need to stop putting out cash grabs, and hopefully Helldivers teaches the other live service games that they don't need to charge $250 for DLC to be successful. Now, with all the positive stuff out of the way, it really has to be said that it feels like they do not test these weapons and even some of the patches in the slightest before launching them into the game and putting them in the player's hands. The player base as a whole does feel like we are the beta testers. Now, in my opinion, we really need a beta server or just a planet added to the galactic map. Maybe take Mars, right by Super Earth for example, and call this the new weapon testing plant. I know the training ground is technically located on that planet, but maybe we can add some missions to that planet where new patches go live before it gets pushed to the whole galaxy, and new weapons could possibly go on that planet at least a week or two ahead of time, just so we can get some bug fixes in before they launch. Also, by the way, make sure this map doesn't affect the liberation percentages, keep it separate from the major orders. And honestly, if Arrowhead wanted something like this to be closed and you kind of have to apply to get into that server, so be it. But the community manager in the Discord has confirmed that the couple dozen games that QA testers play isn't enough to find these bugs before pushing them live, and that's just the industry model. But Arrowhead, you guys have innovated live service in some very positive ways already, and I urge you guys to innovate it some more. Get a couple hundred people, if not a couple thousand free beta testing players who would be happy to do it and find bugs on weapons before they went live to everyone. Even make it so that there's a hard line in the sand that this isn't a server for feedback, it's not a server for balance changes, it's a testing server to find any sort of bugs. Make that a clear line that balance is not what the playtesting is for, because I get it, the devs seem to have their own balance ideas for this game. Even though some of the players, myself included, don't always agree with it, I do respect that you guys do have a vision when it comes to balance for your game. But balance isn't the issue here. What the issue is that so many weapons, stratagems, and patches are all adding more and more bugs to the game than just the Terminids. And that is pretty much it for the video. Please comment down below what you think about this and if you think this is something Arrowhead could add. And if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe on it. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out.